I got this guy up here on the lift and finally got started working on it, and we've changed directions a couple times on it and added a few things. But what does it take to get the oil pan off a Foxbody? Well, either pull the motor or pull the front cradle. Those are pretty much your only two options because of this front sump here. That's what causes the issue. And come to find out, the issue on this guy's car is that it has a high volume oil pump, and on a high volume oil pump there's a little bolt right there that does not clear the oil pan, and that bolt happens to stick straight through the oil pan. So that's what happened on this guy's car. Brand new oil pan, brand new everything, and stick a bolt right through the pan. So we got a high capacity Moroso pan coming. And this guy really wants to put a turbo kit on here. I guess we're going to do an on-3 turbo kit here in a month or two. I told him what we really need to do is we need to get this thing running and driving, and he just needs to drive it for a little while, and we need to find the other kinks in it, because I've already found a couple of things that just need to be corrected. You know, oil pan and a few other things. So he's on the same page where he's just gonna basically drive it for a month or two, put a few hundred miles on it at least, run several tanks of gas through it, and let's just get it running and make sure nothing else pops up. And then he's gonna bring it back and put a turbo kit on it. Well, since we're gonna do that, I did some research on the on-3 kit. They want you to punch a hole in the oil pan to do the turbo drain. The turbo actually goes up there where the air filter is. So I've got a good buddy from my old days at Molex who's pretty good at welding. And so I'm going to take him the new Moroso high capacity oil pan, and I've got a steel bung, and he's going to weld it in for me, and then I'm going to stick the oil pan back on there. So oil pan should be here later today. Bung should be here tomorrow. Should be able to get the bung welded in tomorrow. Get it all back together tomorrow, and hopefully start tuning it tomorrow. I don't think I'll finish all of that tomorrow. We'll just see how it goes. But man, Foxbodies, this is a racket to have to do all this. So before I tighten down the Moroso oil pan, I'm just checking, because I'm paranoid now, are the bolts going to clear? And there's plenty of room all the way around the base of this oil pickup. The other thing that because there's a pretty good size oil drain plug there. The other thing that I'm checking is the clearance for the new pickup tube. There's supposed to be a ½ inch, a maximum of a ½ inch. And my little light is 12 millimeters tall. And it won't squeeze underneath it, so I'm right in the sweet spot. I'm less than the max. That's what I need. So now we gotta find a place to put the oil drain, because the turbo is gonna be up there. So I'm thinking that the oil drain is probably gonna go about right there, or maybe right there. I can't really put it there, that's too low. It's got to go as high up as possible, so I've got to kind of take it down and see what clearances I've gotten where, so that I can decide where I'm going to put it. But it's going to be in this area somewhere, because the turbo's going to be up there. If it's not one thing, it's another. So I got the pan up there. Everything, I just kind of put it up there and then like hand tighten the bolts just to hold it in place. And I noticed that as I was tightening it, this was actually popping out. Now, I did not do that. That was already there. That crap, I did not do that. But it started pushing the dipstick out. So, took a quick peek over here. You can actually see where it was contacting the oil pan. So, there is no way the factory dipstick will clear this oil pan. They have provisions for an aftermarket one, but I don't know how to plug the hole for the factory dipstick other than to drill and tap that hole and put a plug in there. Because the oil pan looks like it will cover part of the hole, but it won't cover the entire hole. So, modifying cars, it's just part of it. So I got the bung welded in here, real nice and tight. Make sure we don't have any leaks. And it got welded from both sides. And this guy is pretty good at welding, so I trust him. And then it's going to get a cap on it until we get the turbo kit. The other thing is I ended up having to order the Moroso Dipstick because there's just no way around it. This one is just not going to work. So what I'm going to do is I've got freeze plugs that are the size of the dipstick hole. So I'm going to put a little of my Indian head sealer on it, which this stuff, it's like concrete once it dries, and put a little bit of that down on there, and then tap that down in the hole to make sure it's sealed permanently forever. And get the oil pan back on there, get this puppy on the dyno. So I got the new oil pan in there, everything's all tightened down and all that good stuff. I went to drop the K-member back down, or the car back on the K-member, and right here, the oil pan was hitting this lip and pushing the whole motor sideways about 1/4 of an inch. So the engine was in there kind of canted. I did some research, and apparently the convertible K-member is different than the non-convertible version. And Moroso just assumes these are all non-convertible, or you have a K-member, a tubular K-member. So apparently if you have a tubular K-member, there's more room. But I figured out that if I just cut this little rolled part and then beat this in just a little bit, it gives me about 1/4 of an inch clearance from this hitting the oil pan. So now I'm just going to go in here and kind of weld these two pieces of metal back together. And hopefully I'll be good. So the sun has gone down, and I have been fighting this thing most of the day. So I got my little joint there welded back together, and I painted over everything because I had to kind of clean it off. And now I've got, I don't know, 1/4 of an inch where it's just rubbing before. I got all that back together, dropped the motor down, and started to tighten down the steering rack. And the steering rack was actually kind of drooping down a little bit because I didn't have these bolts tight. But then as soon as I tightened them, it bowed up, kind of like that. And whenever I did, it was actually touching the oil pan. So what I had to do is go to the motor mount and make a little shim to lift the engine up just a little bit. So now I've actually got about 1/4 of an inch of clearance around the steering rack. Boy, this thing has just been a chore to get fitted in there. Thank goodness I had, I guess you call me a hoarder, but these are the, whatever you call them, fasteners for the new lift. They actually were holding the two halves of the lift together. And I haven't thrown them away, and I probably never will, because it's always nice to have scrap metal laying around. So there was actually 2 of these big tabs like this, so I just cut a little part of it off, drilled a hole in it, and that gave me the perfect little shim to shim up the motor in this thing so that it clears this oil pan. Boy, this thing has been a chore. Got the freeze plug in the dipstick hole. That's where the new dipstick goes, right there. So that'll be here in a couple days. Now it's on to getting the oil pan on there. And yet another thing is interfering. The sway bar is hitting the oil pan. So I guess I'm gonna have to shim right there to bring those down enough where it can clear the oil pan. But man, this thing is less than, not even close to drop in. So I finally get this car up on the dyno, and this thing has just been fighting me every step of the way. I'm talking about everything you can think of. So finally got the oil pan up there, got everything all checked out, everything's good. Just doing one final once over, and it's missing bell housing bolts. 3 of them. It has, I think, 6, I can't remember, but it was missing 3 bell housing bolts. And like, what the heck? So I had to find bell housing bolts. Finally get it up here on the dyno, get everything going, and as soon as I start driving it on the dyno, it overheats. Like, what the heck? So I check, no coolant. There was almost no coolant. It was probably the radiator was probably halfway full. And mind you, I've never had this thing running for more than 60 seconds, just enough to move it around from place to place. So get that straightened out. But before I even got it over to the dyno, while I was still in the bay, I got it started and was trying to get it to stay running just to get it warmed up while I was working on the tune, and it melted this plug wire, which you'll notice there's black plug wires on it now. But I mean, it was running for maybe 5 minutes, and this thing was in there like this away from the header, and it just sort of rotated around just enough. Well, it was on this side, but it rotated just enough to where it touched the header. I'm talking about 5 minutes. The car was running maybe 5 minutes. So I made sure I got all the plug wires out of the way of anything hot. Got them as far away from things as I possibly could. And then get up here on the dyno. It overheats. Not like blow the motor overheat, just enough to where it started shooting steam out of this little steam vent right here. It's like, what the heck? Shut everything off. Sure enough, it doesn't have any coolant in it. So then I go to start tuning. I'm doing steady state tuning to get the VE table dialed in, and I'm at, like, I think I was at the 3000 RPM column, and it catches on fire. And no, I'm not joking. I was like, I could see a little bit of smoke. I was like, oh gosh, is it overheating again? The temperature gauge isn't overhot. So I hopped out, I looked, and oh my gosh, there's a little fire. Well, guess what the fire was? The freaking spark plugs caught on fire. The spark plug boots. I never in my life. It was these two right here. And it didn't hurt anything. It didn't melt any wires. It didn't do anything. It just caught the little boot on fire. It's like, what the heck? So now I have to go get new spark plug wires, and I have these things, I mean, they're not even remotely close to anything. And that one still melted a little bit. So what I've been having to do is run it for no more than about 30 to 45 seconds at a time, because those headers just get so hot up underneath the hood that it's just cooking the freaking spark plug wires. And I can't, they're nowhere near anything underneath there. Whenever the guy brought it to me, the clutch cable housing was melted right here. That right there, that was melted. And then I think over here, I think that's the speedometer cable. It was melted. So it's obviously had this problem. So it really, really needs those headers taken off and get header wrap on it. I don't know how else to solve it. Because I can't run the thing for more than about a minute on the dyno before it gets too hot to do anything. Like, you can touch different parts of the engine and it's not that hot, but those headers, for some reason, are just getting scorching hot. I don't know what it is. But thank God I put these little fire extinguishers in the shop as soon as I opened. So I hopped out, I poked my head, I saw a little flame right there, and I just ran and grabbed the fire extinguisher and just doused it. And that's what all of this, they're what are they called? It's a dry fire extinguisher, so basically it shoots powder everywhere. So now there's powder covering everything. But man, this thing has been fighting me and fighting me and fighting me. Had to get a different dipstick to put in it. Had to notch the frame. I mean, like, oh my gosh, you name it. This car has caused me trouble after trouble after trouble. But it's almost done. Oh, the other thing it did, my RPM probe melted. It was on the spark plug wire right next to the where the spark plug wires caught on fire. So the two that caught on fire, it was one over, and it melted. But I caught it before it did any real damage. The biggest damage it did was this, and melted those stupid plug boots. But I can't believe that those plug boots actually caught on fire. You would think they would be made out of some kind of flame retardant material, but apparently not. So I can't really finish the tune. I have all the fuel map done, and I have everything done that I can do tonight. I ordered an RPM probe last night and had it overnighted, so it should be here tomorrow. So hopefully I can finish this car tomorrow and actually get some numbers. So my friend's Mustang over here, I guess friend, he's been in the shop so long, is as done as I can get it for right now. I am bumping up against a whole bunch of other appointments that are in succession one day after the next, and it's good enough that it can run and drive and he can enjoy it for a few weeks until I can get back around to it. But everything is good right now, made good power, at least for what it is. Trouble it's having right now is there's something weird going on with the fuel pump, where sometimes it's like it depends on what mood it's in. Sometimes the fuel pump just doesn't put out fuel and it doesn't idle really well, but then whenever you give it gas, the fuel pressure comes in and everything is fine. So it's really unusual. I don't know if the fuel pump is clogged up or if the wiring has gone bad or what, but he's going to have to bring it back another time whenever I can get into it, if he even wants me to. But for right now, we're going to call this guy done and on to the next cars.